Culture Wars in the Texas House. Let's get dialed in. Good evening, friends and foes alike, and welcome to Texas Talkin, the only show that tells you what your elected officials really did after they posted that photo shaking hands with Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, and the Dairy Queen manager. I'm your host, Shiloh Platts, spirit animal of the Texas right, and the guy who still believes liberty's supposed to mean something, and that bipartisan isn't just Latin for you're about to get screwed. Now let's ask the question that makes lobbyists and consultants alike sweat through their starched collars. Is the culture of the Texas House changing? Shockingly, yes. And believe it or not, it might actually be changing for the better. No, we haven't entered conservative utopia. There's still plenty of swamp gas in the air. But something has shifted, ladies and gentlemen. You can feel it. Like that first cold front in October, you can tell change is happening. The old Texas House ran on a simple principle: do nothing, say nothing, hand power to Democrats, and hope nobody back home notices. But now, the voters noticed, and they brought friends. Suddenly, some of these squishy Republicans, the ones who used to vote with Democrats and then post a flag emoji on X, are acting a little different, a little jumpier, a little more, oh crap, am I getting primaried? And you know what? Some of them are. We've got a fresh crop of conservative freshmen walking in like they own the place, filing bold bills, refusing to bow down to the establishment, and asking questions like, hey, why does it feel like the guy who wants drag queens in libraries is calling the shots? It's a beautiful thing. You can almost hear the panic at the Austin Club. Now, is targeting weak Republicans in the primaries a legitimate strategy? Well, of course it is. And here's the part they don't want you to hear. I believe it works. You see, in 2024, the grassroots knocked out more establishment Republicans than a pack of Red Bulls at a young Republicans convention. These weren't random flukes. These were organized, disciplined, targeted efforts. And they sent a loud message. If you lie to us, we will replace you. When you put an R after your name, it should have meaning. Now, of course, the political consultants cried about it on X, clutching their pearls. Oh no, purity tests. Spare me. If asking your Republican rep to vote like a Republican is a purity test, then hand me a Scantron and a number 2 pencil, because we're going to keep doing it. And finally, are there any Democrats in the Texas House with even a shred of conservatism? My take? No, none. Not one. You'd have better luck finding a vegan cookie recipe that doesn't involve spiritual sadness. Look, I'll give credit where credit is due. If a Democrat ever votes the right way on something, I'll notice. But at this point, their entire platform is built on taxes, gender confusion, degeneracy, and criminal leniency. You're not going to find a Reagan Democrat. They went extinct about the same time as Blockbuster and phone booths. So what's the takeaway? Well, things are changing. They are changing, slowly, painfully, but they're changing. The good guys are finally showing up, standing up, and refusing to be bullied by the cocktail party country club class. And if the fake Republicans, the Democrats, and the consultants don't like it, too bad. This is Texas. We don't bow to cowards, we boot them out of office. Joining us tonight for expert analysis and inside baseball that you won't find anywhere else is Luke Macias, keeper of all things conservative. I'm Shiloh Platts. This is Texas Talkin, the show where we say what many are too scared to say, and we say it in boots. Don't go anywhere. Luke Macias is up next. And joining me now is a man who keeps the left on the run and the right fired up. If you're a Texas Republican, he probably needs no introduction. I'm talking, of course, about Luke Macias. Luke, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Shiloh.
So I want to talk for a minute right out of the gate about the culture in the Texas House. Has there, in your view, been a shift? And if so, how would you characterize it?
So, a definition of culture would be super helpful to start. So, I think an easy definition of culture, and probably one of the most accurate ones, is that culture is based on what you honor and what you shame. What you honor and what you shame. Everybody has culture. Your church has a culture. Your community has a culture. Your family has a culture. The Texas House has a culture, right? What do you honor and what do you shame? And this is why conservative grassroots people actually decided to fight earlier in the session when leadership just wanted to honor the life of Cecile Richards, right? Let's
The
just honor the
abortion
life
Planned
the
Parenthood lady.
largest, yeah, of the largest facilitator of child sacrifice in American history. And you go, no, we don't honor that because culture is what you honor and what you shame. And what ultimately happened on that day was that Republicans realized through the argumentation made by the most conservative fighters in the Texas House that it was not a good thing to honor the life of this woman. And so that resolution died. And I use that as an example to say that the culture in the Texas House is on an improving trajectory. That's the
I would
reality.
agree.
So yes, big picture, in 2023, less than 10% of a conservative Republican agenda passed the Texas House. This session, I think it's closer to 50% is what I would give it as a whole. That's an improvement. It's an improvement on the type of policy that is allowed. The expectation of Republicans, even those who I don't like all the time, is that we should do more Republican policy than less, right? So
What a concept.
if they're looking at a stack of bills, it doesn't seem to be on the table for them to kill a bunch of them. Maybe some of them, maybe even some really important ones, which I've called people out for killing, really important Republican policy. But those are the type of cultural shifts. The culture is improving. It's on an improving trajectory. That is because of what the grassroots has done to make the Texas House dozens of votes more conservative. And so the other quote I use a lot, I think, Shiloh, you and I have talked about this. You're very familiar with this quote, but the Milton Friedman quote that says, you're never going to elect enough good people who want to do the right thing. The key is to create a political environment such that the wrong people want to do the right thing. You have to make the path of least resistance for Republican elected officials to deliver conservative Republican policy. That's not all fixed. It's not all rainbow and sunshine, but we're in a much better position. We should be grateful for that, recognize that, and say, what can we do to continue to make sure that that happens?
Well, I want to talk next about what we can do to make sure that continues to happen. You mentioned the conservative grassroots and sort of giving the grassroots praise for affecting this change that we've seen take place between 2023 and 2024. So much of that change I would attribute to the freshman class that just came in, right? We sent over a dozen bad incumbents packing their bags this past primary cycle. So in your view, Luke, is targeting weak Republicans with primary challengers an effective strategy?
So I think the important thing to recognize about this upcoming campaign cycle in general is that it is a different cycle. There are going to be different kind of coalitions aligning. The governor himself last election was campaigning across the state against a lot of very powerful Republican incumbents and chairmen because they stood in the way of quite a bit of his agenda, the biggest one being school choice. The president of the United States came in, Donald Trump, and actually endorsed against a large group of Republicans, not only helping defeat incumbents, but even making sure that certain open seats went in a conservative direction, like West Ferdell and Kerrville, who is in a very competitive open seat. Texans for Lawsuit Reform was trying to buy that district, and they failed. Donald Trump came in and chose West Ferdell in the last week, which definitely took that race from being closer to a much wider margin. And so it is important for the grassroots to recognize some of those changes. The governor has said that for this cycle, he will be endorsing all of the Republicans that voted for school choice as number one agenda item. The president of the United States came out and endorsed all those Republicans who are running for re-election. The only Republicans he didn't endorse, which I believe you pointed out on X, was Dade Phelan and then Gary Van Dever in Texarkana. And so probably two of the five most liberal Republicans in the Texas House, next to Ken King and Stan Lambert and some of those people. So Those two didn't get endorsed, but Trump has endorsed the rest. So for the way I would say is that the bar has been raised for what will make a strong, legitimate challenger, right? The bar was lower for what it took for a grassroots candidate to defeat a well-entrenched moderate Republican incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
And we recognize that, right? If your friend comes to you and says, I want to run for school board, I'm a conservative, I have $100, you might
Say good
go,
luck.
I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on that.
Sure.
If he comes and says, I'm going to run for school board, just to let you know, I've got $25,000. You're like, that'd be the largest school board race in Beaumont history. Let's go. Who knows?
Sure.
So I think grassroots people should understand that the bar has been raised for what it takes to actually be a strong, legitimate grassroots conservative because the alignment is different in this cycle. And then also, more Republicans as a whole voted better as a whole. That is just something to recognize. In fact, I had a conservative lawmaker make that recognition. Texans for Fiscal Responsibility just released their fiscal index. And yes, all these incoming freshmen were strong A's. There were quite a few Republican incumbents that were D's in the past that might be B's, or and that in itself is an improvement as well that we should recognize. So I just think that, is it a legitimate strategy? Yes, the Texas
With
House
quality candidates.
The Texas House has to be more conservative. We have to move the Texas House to the right. But I do think that prudence is also a virtue that conservatives should kind of employ when figuring out where to spend their time and what to focus on.
Now, I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about our friends, the Democrats, and ask you, in your view, Luke, is there a Democrat in Austin, and even more specifically the Texas House, with even a shred of conservatism?
So I will first answer with the Texas Senate, which you specifically said the Texas House, but I'll go back to the Texas House in a second. I think a good example of somebody who at least is very open to certain things would be Chuy Hinojosa, who represents some area in South Texas. A good example being he was a joint author on the China land ban this last session. He heavily pushed the bill that was going to put a class talking about the dangers of communism in the classroom. And so, yes, there are still some more moderate Democrats, especially in the Texas Senate, where, again, the culture encourages that type of moderation. Remember, culture, what you honor, what you praise. The culture of the Texas Senate is that when Democrats moderate and become more conservative on different issues and are willing to be more reasonable, that is praised in that chamber. That is lifted up. In the Texas House, that's not always the case. In fact, a lot of the Democrats who are given substantial influence and power, Aaron Zwiener is a good example, and other people like that, they're significantly catered to. James Tallarico. These are people that are some of the craziest radical Democrats. Now, are there still some more reasonable Democrats? Yes. They largely are in South Texas, and they will show up at times on different issues, right? Now, again, a lot of these Democrats, they might still be really bad on transgender issues or bad on most gun issues. So, but they will pipe up certain times on certain issues. Richard Raymond, of course, is the best example. There's a great conversation with Michael Sullivan and Richard Raymond on Real Texans, which is a Sunday show.
Great show.
That interview between Richard Raymond and Michael Sullivan will probably kind of bring attention to one of the last remaining Democrats that is truly a more conservative Democrat. Some of the other Democrats in South Texas as a whole are just a little more reasonable, a little less crazy. So that's what I would say.
So I want to close out our conversation tonight by talking about a topic that I know will be on everyone's minds next week, and that is the special session called by Governor Abbott. Are the Democrats going to abandon ship on us yet again and break quorum? How do you feel that's going to play out?
Yeah, so quorum has historically been something that is very rarely used. It's kind of talked about like it's something that could happen any day, anytime. They get mad over anything. It's important to understand that I think it's been used 4 or 5 times in Texas history. 3 of the 5, I think, were literally like people walking out of the chamber for 3 hours and then coming back, like negotiating a paragraph away from a 10-page bill. I'm not the expert. I'm just telling you what I recall from the research I've done. And then there were the two more notable recent ones. There was the one with a mid-session redistricting where they fled to Oklahoma, right? And put up in the hotels and did that whole thing. And ultimately they came back. We still get what we want at the end of the day. And then you have the situation in 2021 where they flee on election integrity, which they eventually come back and we eventually get the election integrity bill done. So it's just not an effective strategy. It's also not a reasonable tool within the legislative toolbox, period. It's not considered something that a group of people can do as a legitimate tool, which is why there's now steeper penalties when they leave. They're
And what
fined.
are those penalties?
The one penalty is a $500 a day fine, and they cannot pay for that fine out of their taxpayer account or their campaign account. So one of the things that they would have done if you had said the campaign account is they could just find national Democrats to fund their campaign account, and then they could pay for that. It's a $500, I believe, a day fine that has to be paid by them. They have to pay it. So if they're going to go flee for 20 days, they're going to owe the state of Texas $10,000. And they can't raise money for it from their campaign, and they can't use taxpayer dollars for it. So the fine, there are other penalties that the legislature could decide to impose: loss of seniority, and punish their staff budgets, reduce their staff budgets, take away the vice chairman budgets, which shouldn't have existed in the first place. So there's various things like that that they could do, but the fine gets levied upon them. My understanding, I'd have to go back and reread the rules, so I can't speak with full authority on it, but I will say that I believe the fine just starts getting implemented as soon as they are breaking that quorum for more than a day.
Now, does it fall on Speaker Burrows to enforce some of these penalties?
Speaker Burrows will definitely have the authority to determine how many tools are utilized to put pressure on the Democrats to come back. That will most definitely be within the purview of him, not only when they're gone, but then also if they come back eventually. So again, they could come back, and there are certain tools that you might not be able to do while they're gone because there's no quorum, and there's only certain things the legislature can do without a quorum. But when they do come back, there will be additional motions that could be made and things that could be voted on that would additionally punish the Democrats if they were to leave and break quorum, which would then be fully in the purview of the speaker to decide what he would or wouldn't recognize as a motion that he would let the body vote on. So he will have some influence, not, entire influence over everything.
And do you think any lessons were learned over the way that I believe it was mismanaged by Speaker Phelan when he was Speaker at the time during that last election integrity walkout? I would hope that Speaker Burrows learned some lessons from that and would, in fact, enforce some of these penalties and fines if the Democrats decide to go rogue.
I hope he does too. And I think it could be a real opportunity for the Republican caucus to come together.
Yes.
I think that whenever we're realizing the Democrats are serious enemies, it tends to unite us. And much of what divides the Republican House, Republicans in the Texas House, is when some Republicans stop treating Democrats like the enemy.
Exactly.
And working with them to kill some Republican policies. That tends to divide us. Surprise,
yes.
Surprise. So the goal would be that in the event the Democrats opt to use that tool in their toolbox that is not really a legitimate tool, that Republicans actually come together and say, we can inflict pain on the minority party, and we should, because we have control. And so that would be the hopeful response that we see from the speaker. If he takes that and decides to do that, it will unite the Republican caucus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It seems the Democrats are diametrically opposed to congressional redistricting in Texas, which is exactly what tells me that we need to do it. How important is it, Luke, that we get this done in this special session?
Incredibly important. I mean, the reality is that there is a scenario, depending on what happens with the economy and other world affairs between now and next November, there is a chance that Texas redistricting could be what keeps Congress in Republican hands. Now, it could be that it just grows our majority, which would mean we have a few less of these moderate Republicans we have to negotiate with at the negotiation table. And it could be that it's like when the state of New York is the one that delivered us the majority at one point, and the state of Texas could be the one that restores or keeps the majority if the midterms do not go well, but we are able to shore up 3 to 5 congressional districts, that could be massively impactful. So it's incredibly important, as well as the abortion pill bill. We have over 20,000 children at minimum that are dying with the abortion pill every single year. Those are murders that are occurring in our state, and we should punish people for doing that. We also have the women's privacy bill that will keep men, biological men, out of women's private spaces like bathrooms and locker rooms. And then also taxpayer-funded lobbying ban and property tax relief and reform. The taxpayer-funded lobbying ban, I actually think of all those issues, will be the hardest one to pass. And I think the one that Republicans have to unite behind the most. And then with property tax relief and reform, there's just so many reforms that were left on the table that should happen. And there's additional relief that should be delivered. So I'm pretty hopeful that this could be a special session that gets even more wins on the board than we got during the regular session, which could give everybody rightfully a really good taste in their mouth coming out of the next 30 days.
Luke Macias, ladies and gentlemen. Luke, I want to thank you for taking time to come on and speak with us tonight, sir. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great state of Texas. Thank you for helping us keep Texas talking.
God bless you, Shiloh.
Stay dialed in to interviews and content just like this by clicking that follow button on my Facebook page, or hit the subscribe button to learn more about exclusive access that you won't want to miss.